The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, which Ambassador Sarah Chen would later reflect was perfectly fitting. Tuesdays had always been unremarkable days, the kind of day when nothing interesting happened. Today would shatter that assumption so completely that humanity would measure time differently afterward. The transmission bypassed every security protocol, every firewall, every defense system that Earth's combined military and scientific communities had spent decades perfecting. It simply appeared on every screen, every device, every electronic display capable of showing text or images. From the massive screens in Times Square to the humble smartphone of a farmer in rural Montana, the message was identical, translated instantaneously into every human language with perfect accuracy. Sarah had been reviewing agricultural reports in her office at the United Nations when her computer screen flickered. She looked up from her coffee, expecting another routine technical glitch. Instead, she found herself staring at symbols that hurt to look at directly, as if they existed in more dimensions than human eyes could properly process. The symbols shifted, morphed, and suddenly resolved into words she could understand. Citizens of Sol. 3. Designation. Earth. This communication originates from the Galactic Council of Unified Species. You will acknowledge receipt immediately. Sarah's coffee mug hit the floor, shattering into pieces that seemed to echo in the sudden silence that had fallen over the entire building. Outside her window, she could see people stopping in the streets, staring at their phones with expressions of bewilderment and growing alarm. The message continued, and Sarah found herself reading words that would change everything. Your species has been observed for 17 of your solar cycles. Your technological advancement and aggressive expansion patterns have been cataloged and analyzed. The Council has reached a unanimous decision regarding your future status within the galactic community. Secretary General Martinez burst through her door without knocking, his face pale. Sarah, are you seeing this? She nodded, unable to speak. The message was still unfolding across her screen, each word appearing with mechanical precision. Humanity poses an unacceptable risk to established galactic peace. Your warlike nature, combined with your rapid technological advancement and unpredictable behavioral patterns, represents a clear and present danger to all civilized species. The Council hereby demands your immediate surrender. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Outside, Sarah could hear car alarms beginning to wail as automated systems throughout the city began to malfunction. The message was somehow interfering with Earth's entire technological infrastructure simply by existing. The terms of surrender are non-negotiable, the message continued. All technological development beyond your current level must cease immediately. Your population must be reduced to sustainable levels through peaceful relocation to designated worlds. Your planet will be placed under Council protection and monitoring. Compliance is mandatory. Martinez had sunk into a chair, staring at his own device with the expression of a man watching his world end. This can't be real, he whispered. This has to be some kind of hoax, some elaborate prank. But Sarah knew better. The message carried with it a weight, an authority that no human deception could replicate. More than that, it carried proof. As she watched, images began to appear on the screen. Images of Earth taken from impossible angles, showing details that could only have been captured from space, but with technology far beyond anything humanity possessed. The images shifted, showing other worlds. Beautiful, pristine worlds, with cities that stretched beyond the horizon, populated by beings that were definitely not human, ships that moved between stars like fish swimming through water, technologies that seemed to operate on principles that human science hadn't even theoretical frameworks for understanding.
The compliance deadline is 72 of your hours, the message stated with cold finality.
Failure to comply will result in the implementation of defensive measures for galactic security. This communication ends. The screens went dark. Every electronic device on the planet simultaneously shut down for exactly 37 seconds, then rebooted normally. But the world those systems came back online to was fundamentally different from the one they had served just minutes before. Sarah's phone began ringing immediately. Martinez was already on his phone, speaking rapidly in Spanish to what sounded like the president of Mexico. Outside, she could hear the distant wail of sirens as emergency services tried to respond to a crisis they had no procedures for handling. The first call was from the President of the United States. The second was from the British Prime Minister. By the time Sarah had fielded calls from 17 world leaders, she was beginning to understand the magnitude of what had just occurred. The message hadn't just been received by government officials or military leaders. It had been received by everyone, everywhere, all at the same time. 7-year-old children in Tokyo had read it. Farmers in Bangladesh had seen it on their irrigation control panels. A mountain climber on Everest had watched it appear on his GPS device. The message had been designed to reach every human being on Earth simultaneously, and it had succeeded perfectly. Dr. Sabria. James Wright from NASA arrived at the UN building within 2 hours, his hair disheveled and his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and excitement. "Sarah, we're tracking over 400 objects in our solar system that weren't there yesterday," he announced without preamble. "They're not following any known orbital mechanics. Some of them are changing position in ways that violate physics as we understand it." Sarah gestured for him to sit down. The conference room was filling rapidly with officials from every major nation and international organization. "Tell me what you know, James." "The objects range in size from roughly a school bus to something approximately the size of Manhattan," Wright explained, his hands shaking as he pulled up holographic displays from his tablet. "They're composed of materials that our sensors can't properly analyze. Some of them appear to be partially existing in what we can only describe as folded space." Defense Minister Kowalski from Poland leaned forward. "Are they weapons?" "We don't know," Wright admitted. "But the energy signatures we're detecting suggest that if they are weapons, they could sterilize our planet without breaking stride. We're talking about technology that makes our most advanced systems look like stone tools." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Sarah looked around the table at the faces of people who had spent their careers dealing with international crises and saw fear unlike anything she had ever witnessed. These were individuals who had navigated nuclear standoffs, climate disasters, and global pandemics. None of them had ever encountered anything that made them feel quite this helpless. General Harrison from the United States Joint Chiefs of Staff broke the silence. "What about resistance? Do we have any options for fighting back?" Wright laughed, but there was no humor in it. "General, one of those objects moved from Jupiter's orbit to Mars' orbit in 14 minutes. That's not just faster than light travel. That's faster than light travel while carrying a mass larger than our biggest cities. They're operating on physics we don't even have theories for." "So we surrender," said Chancellor Weber from Germany, her voice flat with resignation. "No." The voice came from an unexpected source. Professor Elena Vasquez, a xenobiologist from Mexico who had been quietly observing the discussion. "We don't surrender." All eyes turned to her. Sarah had known Elena for years, had always respected her brilliant mind and unconventional approaches to problems. But right now, the woman looked like she was either having a breakdown or a breakthrough. "Elena," Sarah said gently, "they have technology that can apparently ignore the laws of physics. They have ships that dwarf our cities. They've demonstrated the ability to take control of our entire planetary communication system without effort. What exactly are you suggesting?" Elena stood up, her eyes bright with something that might have been madness or inspiration. "I'm suggesting that they made a mistake. A big one." The room waited. "They told us to surrender," Elena continued. "They demanded compliance. They gave us an ultimatum. But think about what that means. If they could simply take what they wanted, why would they bother asking? If they could eliminate us as a threat, why give us time to respond?" Wright frowned. "You think they need our cooperation for some reason?" "I think they're afraid of us," Elena said simply. The silence that followed was different from the previous silences. This one was charged with possibility, with a sudden shift in perspective that changed everything about their situation. Defense Minister Tanaka from Japan spoke carefully. "Professor Vasquez, you're suggesting that a galactic civilization with technology beyond our comprehension is afraid of humans?" "Think about their message," Elena replied, beginning to pace. "They called us warlike. They said we were unpredictable. They specifically mentioned our aggressive expansion patterns and rapid technological advancement. Those aren't the words of conquerors describing prey. Those are the words of established powers describing a threat." Sarah felt something stirring in her chest, something she hadn't felt since the message arrived. It might have been hope, or it might have been the kind of stubborn defiance that had carried humanity through every dark period in their history. "What are you saying, Elena?" "I'm saying they gave us 72 hours for a reason. I'm saying they're trying to solve their human problem without actually having to fight us. I'm saying that maybe, just maybe, they know something about us that we're only beginning to understand ourselves." General Harrison leaned back in his chair. "And what's that?" Elena smiled, and for the first time since the message had arrived, it was a real smile. "That we're absolutely insane by galactic standards, and that might be exactly what we need to be." The room erupted in discussion, but Sarah found herself staring out the window at the sky. Somewhere up there, representatives of an entire galaxy were waiting for humanity's response. They expected surrender, submission, compliance. They were about to learn something that every human civilization throughout history had eventually discovered. Humanity's greatest strength had always been their absolute refusal to behave rationally when faced with extinction. The next 71 hours were going to be very interesting indeed. 68 hours after first contact, the emergency session of the United Nations had transformed into something unprecedented in human history. Representatives from every nation on Earth sat in the same room, having set aside centuries of disagreements to address a single question: how do you tell an entire galaxy to go to hell? Sarah Chen watched the proceedings with a mixture of fascination and terror. In less than 3 days, humanity had accomplished what decades of diplomacy had failed to achieve. Every border dispute, every trade war, every ideological conflict had been set aside in favor of a single unified response to the Galactic Council's ultimatum. The irony wasn't lost on her that it had taken the threat of alien invasion to finally unite the human race. Professor Elena Vasquez had become an unlikely central figure in the discussions. Her initial insight about the aliens' fear had sparked a flurry of analysis from experts in psychology, military strategy, and xenobiology. The picture that had emerged was both encouraging and terrifying. Dr. Samuel Roberts from Oxford had spent 48 hours straight analyzing every aspect of the aliens' message, looking for clues about their psychology and motivations. His findings had been unsettling. The Galactic Council's communication patterns suggest a fundamentally conservative approach to problem-solving, he explained to the Assembly. Everything about their message indicates a civilization, or collection of civilizations, that prizes stability above all else. They didn't threaten to destroy us immediately. They didn't demand tribute or slaves. They asked for surrender and compliance. President Morrison from Australia raised her hand. What does that tell us about them? It tells us they're bureaucrats, Roberts replied with a grim smile. They're administrators managing a stable galactic civilization, and we represent chaos they can't control or predict. They want us neutralized, but they want to do it through proper channels. General Harrison had been working with military strategists from every major nation trying to assess humanity's defensive capabilities. The results had been sobering. In terms of conventional warfare, we might as well be throwing rocks at fighter jets, he reported. Their technology is so far beyond ours that there's no meaningful comparison. However, Dr. Vasquez's theory about the reluctance to engage us directly has led us to consider unconventional approaches. The strategies being discussed would have been considered insane under any other circumstances. Colonel Zhang from China had proposed using civilian spacecraft as kamikaze vessels, loaded with nuclear weapons and aimed at the alien ships. Commander O'Brien from Ireland had suggested biological warfare, despite having no idea whether human pathogens would affect alien physiology. Captain Reyes from Chile had recommended psychological warfare, broadcasting humanity's most violent and disturbing cultural products directly at the alien fleet. Each proposal was more desperate and reckless than the last, but Sarah was beginning to see a pattern emerging. Humanity wasn't approaching this crisis like a rational species would. They were approaching it exactly like Elena had predicted, with the kind of irrational, suicidal determination that had allowed humans to survive every extinction event in their history. Wright had continued monitoring the alien ships, and his reports were becoming increasingly strange.
They're not maintaining standard orbital patterns, he announced during the latest briefing.
Some of the larger vessels have actually moved further away from Earth in the past day. It's almost like they're maintaining distance. Elena leaned forward. Maintaining distance from what? We can't hurt them. That's what's so strange, Wright continued. According to our sensor readings, they could sterilize our planet from their current positions without any effort, but they keep moving to maintain what seems to be a safety buffer. Ambassador Petrov from Russia, a man who had negotiated through 3 different global crises, raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting they're afraid of us getting too close? I'm suggesting they're treating us like a quarantined infection, Wright replied. Like something dangerous that needs to be contained rather than simply eliminated. The implication sent a chill through the room. If the aliens were treating humanity like a dangerous pathogen, it suggested that their fear went beyond simple military concerns. It suggested they viewed human nature itself as a threat to their galactic civilization. As the deadline approached, a consensus had begun to emerge. It wasn't a plan in any traditional sense, it was more like a collective decision to embrace the very characteristics that had made the aliens consider them dangerous in the first place. President Chen from Taiwan stood to address the assembly. We've spent 3 days trying to understand these aliens, trying to find rational solutions to an irrational situation. But perhaps rationality isn't what we need here. She gestured to the massive displays showing the alien ships hovering throughout the solar system. They've given us an ultimatum. They've demanded our surrender. They've threatened our extinction. In their minds, they've been perfectly reasonable and measured in their approach. The room was silent, waiting for her to continue, but they've made one critical error in their calculations, President Chen continued. They've assumed that humans respond to threats the way rational species do. They've assumed that when faced with certain destruction, we'll choose survival over principles.
Mr. Singh from India stood up, and they're wrong.
Completely wrong, agreed Prime Minister Johansson from Sweden. Humans don't surrender. We double down. We get more stubborn, more reckless, more dangerous, the closer we get to destruction. What followed was perhaps the most remarkable display of species-wide defiance in galactic history. One by one, every representative from every nation on Earth stood to voice their agreement with what was essentially a planetary suicide pact. The Republic of Korea stands with humanity, declared President Park. Brazil rejects the alien ultimatum, announced President Silva. Germany will not comply with galactic tyranny, stated Chancellor Weber. The declarations continued around the room, each one more defiant than the last. When the final representative had spoken, Sarah realized she was witnessing something that the Galactic Council had probably never encountered before, an entire species choosing extinction over submission. Elena had been working on humanity's response to the Council, and as the deadline approached, she revealed what might have been the most terrifying document ever composed. I've analyzed their communication patterns, she explained, and I've crafted our response using the same formal protocols they used. But the content, she paused, seeming to gather her courage. The content is going to either save us or get us all killed immediately. She displayed the response on the main screen, and Sarah felt her blood run cold as she read it. To the Galactic Council of Unified Species, humanity acknowledges receipt of your ultimatum and rejects it in its entirety. Your demands for surrender are noted and dismissed. Your threats of defensive measures are acknowledged and welcomed. The message continued in the same formal tone, but with content that became increasingly disturbing. You have identified humanity as unpredictable, warlike, and aggressively expansionist. This assessment is accurate. You have determined that we represent a threat to galactic stability. This assessment is also accurate. You have concluded that we must be contained or eliminated for the safety of your civilization. This assessment is logical but incomplete. Sarah found herself holding her breath as she read the next section. What your assessment fails to account for is that humans become exponentially more dangerous when threatened with extinction. Your ultimatum has not achieved compliance. It has achieved unity. You have succeeded in transforming a fractured, chaotic species into a unified force with a single purpose, proving that humanity cannot be intimidated, controlled, or eliminated by external threats. The final paragraph would later be studied by xenopsychologists throughout the galaxy as an example of weaponized insanity. Your 72-hour deadline expires in 4 hours. When it does, you will discover that humans possess something your advanced technology cannot account for, the absolute refusal to behave rationally when faced with extinction. We do not fear your superior weapons. We do not fear your overwhelming numbers. We do not fear death. What you should fear is what humans become when you take away everything they have to lose. We await your defensive measures with anticipation. The message was signed simply, the human species. General Harrison stared at the response for a long moment. Elena, this is essentially a declaration of war against an entire galaxy. No, Elena replied calmly. This is a declaration of who we are. They wanted to know what they were dealing with. Now they know. As the deadline approached, something unprecedented began happening across Earth. Rather than panic or despair, a strange calm had settled over human civilization. People gathered in public spaces, sharing food and stories. Children played in parks while their parents watched the skies with defiant curiosity rather than fear. News broadcasts had shifted from covering the crisis to celebrating human achievement. Museums opened their doors for free, displaying the greatest accomplishments of human civilization. Orchestras performed in the streets. Scientists published their research openly, sharing humanity's accumulated knowledge with anyone who wanted it. It was as if the entire species had decided that if they were going to be eliminated, they would spend their final hours being fully, completely, unapologetically human. Sarah stood on the roof of the UN building as the deadline approached, surrounded by representatives from every nation on Earth. In her hand, she held the device that would transmit humanity's response to the Galactic Council. At exactly 72 hours after the original ultimatum, she'd pressed the button. The response shot upward through Earth's atmosphere, carrying with it the collective defiance of 8 billion human beings. As it reached space and was received by the alien ships, Sarah felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. They had made their choice. They had chosen to be human, completely and without reservation. Whatever happened next, they would face it as they had faced every challenge in their species' history, together, stubborn, and absolutely refusing to give up. Above them, the alien ships began to move. The alien response came exactly 18 minutes after humanity's message was transmitted. It wasn't another communication. It was a demonstration. Sarah Chen watched from the UN building's roof as one of the smaller alien vessels, roughly the size of the city block, descended through Earth's atmosphere toward the Sahara Desert. The ship moved with impossible smoothness, ignoring wind resistance and gravity as if they were mere suggestions rather than physical laws. Every screen, every device, every electronic display on Earth flickered to life simultaneously, showing a perfect view of the desert from directly above the descending ship. The aliens weren't just going to make their point, they were going to make sure every human being witnessed it. Dr. Wright stood beside Sarah, his instruments tracking the vessel's approach. "It's not generating heat signatures despite atmospheric entry," he reported, his voice tight with tension. "It's not displacing air masses. It's moving through our atmosphere like it exists in a different dimension." The ship settled onto the sand with the gentleness of a feather despite its massive size. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, without any visible weapon discharge or energy beam, a perfect circle of desert simply ceased to exist. The destruction wasn't explosive or violent. It was surgical, precise, and absolute. A hemisphere of sand, rock, and air, 10 kilometers in diameter, vanished as if it had never existed, leaving behind a perfectly smooth crater that reflected the sky like polished glass. The silence that followed was deafening. Across the globe, 8 billion human beings stared at screens showing the impossible precision of the aliens' power, a demonstration of technology that could erase matter from existence without effort, without waste, without even the courtesy of dramatic special effects. Then the ship transmitted a new message, appearing on every screen with the same unstoppable authority as before. "Citizens of Sol. 3. You have witnessed a minimal demonstration of Council defensive technology. The matter displaced represented 0.0001% of our vessel's capability. Your response to our reasonable ultimatum has been noted and filed as evidence of your species' fundamental irrationality." Sarah felt her hands trembling as she read the cold, bureaucratic language describing what amounted to a controlled demonstration of godlike power. This demonstration was conducted in an uninhabited region to minimize casualties, reflecting the Council's preference for peaceful resolution. However, your rejection of reasonable terms and your explicit threats against galactic security have necessitated a recalibration of our approach. The message paused, and Sarah had the horrible feeling that whatever came next would be worse than the demonstration they had just witnessed. New terms: immediate cessation of all space-capable vehicle operations, immediate destruction of all nuclear weapons, immediate surrender of all heads of government for relocation and re-education, compliance timeline. Failure to comply will result in selective population reduction beginning with your largest population centers. The screens went dark for exactly 10 seconds, then displayed a list that made Sarah's blood freeze. Every major city on Earth with population counts and precise geographical coordinates. New York, 8.4 million.
Tokyo, 13.9 million.
London, 9.1 million. The list continued, showing exactly which humans would die first if the ultimatum was rejected again. Then the screens returned to normal, leaving 8 billion people to contemplate the simple mathematical reality of their situation. Dr. Wright was the first to break the silence. "Sarah, they just demonstrated the ability to delete matter from existence. They've escalated from demanding surrender to demanding the complete dismantling of human civilization. And they've given us a list of which cities they'll erase first." Around them, the other representatives were beginning to react. Some were making frantic phone calls to their governments. Others were staring at the screens in shocked silence. A few were quietly weeping. But Sarah noticed something else. Standing apart from the others, Elena Vasquez was smiling. "Elena?" Sarah approached the xenobiologist carefully. "Are you all right?" "I'm perfect," Elena replied, and her smile grew wider. "Sarah, do you realize what just happened? They demonstrated that they can erase our cities from existence?" "No," Elena said, turning to face the group. "They demonstrated that they're still asking for surrender instead of simply taking what they want." The other representatives turned to listen, and Sarah saw something she hadn't expected in their faces. Curiosity rather than despair. Elena continued, her voice growing more animated. "Think about what they just showed us. They have technology that can delete matter from existence. They could have erased Washington, Beijing, Moscow, and London simultaneously and been done with it. Instead, they blew up empty desert and sent us another ultimatum. General Harrison approached, his expression grim. Professor, they've escalated their threats. They're now promising to kill millions of people.
But they haven't done it yet, Elena pointed out. They've had this capability from the beginning.
They could have opened with it. They could have simply erased Earth's major population centers and been done with the problem. But they didn't. They're still trying to achieve compliance through intimidation. Minister Singh from India frowned. You're suggesting they don't want to actually use their weapons? I'm suggesting something worse, Elena replied. I think they can't. The rooftop fell silent except for the distant sounds of the city below. People were returning to their normal activities with the kind of determined normalcy that had always characterized human responses to existential threats. Explain, Sarah said quietly. Elena pulled out her tablet, displaying her analysis of the alien communications. Look at their language patterns. Every message has been formal, bureaucratic, following what appears to be strict protocols. They've given us specific time frames, detailed ultimatums, precise demonstrations. This isn't how conquerors behave. This is how administrators behave. She gestured toward the sky where the alien ships were visible as distant lights. I think the Galactic Council is exactly what it sounds like. A council. A bureaucracy. A collection of species that have achieved stability through rules, procedures, and consensus building. Wright leaned in. So bureaucracies don't just eliminate problems, Elena explained. They follow procedures. They build consensus. They document everything and make sure they can justify their actions to oversight bodies. The implications began to sink in. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. You think they need to justify destroying us? I think they need unanimous consent from every council species before they can eliminate an entire civilization, Elena said. And I think we've just made that consent much harder to obtain. She pulled up the text of humanity's response message. Look at what we told them. We didn't just reject their ultimatum. We confirmed every assessment they made about us being dangerous and unpredictable. We explicitly told them we become more dangerous when threatened. We essentially argued their case for them. Defense Minister Kowalski from Poland looked confused. How does that help us? Because now they have to convince every species in their council that humanity represents a threat requiring total extinction, Elena explained. Before our response, they could argue that we were simply primitive and needed guidance. Now they have to argue that we're so dangerous that extermination is the only option. General Harrison was beginning to understand, and some council species might disagree with that assessment. Exactly. But more than that, Elena continued, they've now demonstrated their weapons to us. They've shown us exactly what we're up against. From their perspective, that should have ended our resistance immediately. She paused, looking around at the group. But we're still here. We're still talking about resistance instead of surrender. That means we've just proved their point about human irrationality in the most dramatic way possible. Sarah felt something stirring in her chest again, that same stubborn hope that had emerged during their first meeting. So what do? We double down, Elena said simply. We show them exactly why they were right to fear us. What followed was the most insane planning session in human history. Military leaders collaborated with scientists, diplomats worked with engineers, and artists consulted with strategists to develop what could only be described as a coordinated campaign of species-wide psychological warfare. The plan that emerged would have been rejected as impossible under normal circumstances. It relied on humanity's complete integration of global communication systems, their unprecedented unity in the face of extinction, and their willingness to embrace tactics that no rational species would consider. Dr. Roberts had spent hours analyzing alien psychology based on their communication patterns. His recommendations formed the foundation of humanity's strategy. They value order, predictability, and rational behavior, he explained. Everything about their approach suggests they expect us to behave like other intelligent species they've encountered. Our advantage is that we don't. The first phase involved every human being on Earth participating in a coordinated display of irrationality that would be visible to the alien ships monitoring the planet. At precisely midnight Greenwich Mean Time, 8 billion humans would simultaneously engage in activities designed to demonstrate humanity's fundamental unpredictability. Children would stay up past their bedtimes to build sandcastles in urban centers. Adults would quit their jobs to pursue impractical dreams. Scientists would publish research on deliberately frivolous topics. Artists would create work celebrating human mortality and stubborn defiance. The goal wasn't to threaten the aliens militarily. It was to demonstrate that humanity couldn't be predicted, controlled, or understood using the rational frameworks that governed galactic civilization. The second phase was more direct. Using every radio telescope, satellite dish, and communication array on Earth, humanity would bombard the alien ships with a carefully curated selection of human cultural products. Not their greatest achievements or most sophisticated art, but their most chaotic, violent, and inexplicable creations. Death metal music, abstract expressionist paintings, reality television, internet memes, professional wrestling. The entire filmography of directors known for incomprehensible plots. Every human cultural product that defied rational explanation or served no apparent purpose beyond entertainment or expression. The third phase was the most dangerous. A direct challenge to the aliens' authority that would force them to either follow through on their threats or admit that their ultimatums were empty. Elena had crafted another message, even more disturbing than the first. This one would be broadcast continuously until the aliens responded, transmitted by every device capable of sending signals into space. Galactic Council, your demonstration of power is noted and dismissed. Your threats of population reduction are acknowledged and rejected. You have shown us that you can delete matter from existence.
We have shown you that we don't care.
The message continued in the same tone of polite, formal defiance. You believe that fear of death will compel our compliance. This belief demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of human psychology. Humans do not become more compliant when threatened. We become more creative in our resistance. The final section would either save humanity or destroy them within hours. Your 24-hour deadline is rejected. We will not comply with your demands. We will not surrender our weapons. We will not submit to re-education. We will not behave rationally. If you wish to eliminate us, you will have to do so while we are laughing at you. We look forward to your next demonstration. As the plan was finalized, Sarah realized they were about to attempt something that had never been tried in galactic history, driving an entire advanced civilization insane through coordinated irrationality. The countdown to midnight began, and with it, humanity's most ambitious project ever undertaken, proving that sometimes the best response to an impossible situation is to become impossible yourself. The coordinated display of human irrationality began at exactly midnight Greenwich Mean Time, and within minutes, alien monitoring systems across the solar system registered what could only be described as species-wide madness. Sarah Chen stood in Times Square watching 8-year-old Marcus Johnson build a sandcastle in the middle of Broadway while his parents cheered and nearby police officers helped gather sand from construction sites. Around the world, similar scenes were playing out simultaneously. Teenagers in Beijing were learning to juggle, while adults in London had organized impromptu opera performances in subway stations. Wright had positioned monitoring equipment throughout Manhattan to track alien responses to the chaos. Sarah, their scanning patterns are changing, he reported through his headset. The ships are conducting much more intensive scans of population centers. They're trying to understand what's happening. That was exactly what humanity wanted. The aliens had spent 17 years studying human behavior, building psychological profiles and predictive models. In a single night, humans were systematically destroying every assumption those models were based on. In Moscow, the entire Bolshoi Ballet was performing Swan Lake in Red Square for an audience of construction workers who had abandoned their jobs to learn interpretive dance. In Sydney, marine biologists were teaching dolphins to play chess, or at least, they were making a very serious attempt to do so. In Cairo, architects were designing buildings inspired by children's drawings, with walls that curved in impossible directions and windows shaped like butterflies. The cultural bombardment had begun simultaneously. Every radio telescope on Earth was broadcasting humanity's most inexplicable cultural products directly at the alien fleet. The messages started with recordings that would confuse any rational species, avant-garde jazz performances, abstract poetry read in monotone voices, and entire television shows about nothing happening to uninteresting people. Then it escalated. The aliens were subjected to an unending stream of human contradiction. Peaceful death metal music, aggressive lullabies, commercials for products that didn't exist, and instructional videos for activities that serve no practical purpose. Reality television shows where people competed to achieve meaningless goals. Internet memes that were funny purely because they made no sense. Dr. Roberts monitored alien communication traffic from a facility in Geneva, tracking how their ships were responding to the coordinated chaos. They're trying to classify what they're receiving, he reported. Their communication bursts have increased by 400% as they attempt to categorize and understand human behavior patterns. The beauty of the plan was its sustainability. Humans weren't pretending to be irrational. They were simply embracing the irrationality that had always been part of their nature. Children naturally built sandcastles in inappropriate places. Adults naturally quit unsatisfying jobs to pursue dreams. Artists naturally created works that served no function beyond expression. For the first time in their recorded history, humans were being completely, authentically themselves on a global scale. Elena Vasquez had positioned herself at the SETI facility in Puerto Rico, personally overseeing the cultural transmission program. "We're not just showing them that we're unpredictable," she explained to Sarah over video link. "We're showing them that unpredictability is fundamental to human nature. We don't just occasionally behave irrationally, we're irrational at our core." The alien response came 6 hours after the coordinated chaos began, but this time it wasn't a formal ultimatum or threat. It was something that chilled every human who read it. A request for information. Citizens of Sol 3. Council monitoring systems have detected anomalous behavior patterns inconsistent with established baseline profiles. Please explain current activities for proper classification and threat assessment. Sarah read the message 3 times before the implications sank in. The aliens weren't threatening humanity anymore. They were confused by them. The Galactic Council, with technology that could delete matter from existence, was asking humans to explain why they were acting weird. "They don't understand," Elena breathed over the communication link. "They literally cannot comprehend what we're doing because it doesn't fit any of their behavioral models for intelligent species." The confusion was about to get worse. Phase 3 of humanity's plan was ready to launch, and it would push alien psychological analysis beyond all breaking points. Instead of explaining their behavior, humans responded by making it more extreme. The second wave of coordinated irrationality made the first wave look rational by comparison. In every major city, humans began constructing art installations that served no purpose except to exist. Not beautiful art or meaningful art, but art that actively defied explanation. Sculptures that looked different from every angle. Paintings that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them. Music that was technically perfect but emotionally impossible to classify. Simultaneously, every communication array on Earth began broadcasting humanity's direct response to the aliens' request for explanation. Galactic Council, you have requested an explanation for current human behavior. Explanation, we are being human. This behavior is normal for our species. We acknowledge that this may be difficult for you to understand. We recommend accepting that humans exist in a state of permanent, controlled chaos. The message continued with content that would later be studied by xenopsychologists as an example of weaponized cultural communication. Your request for behavioral classification is noted but cannot be fulfilled. Human behavior cannot be classified because it is not based on rational decision-making processes. We act according to impulses, emotions, traditions, and random inspiration. This is not a malfunction, this is our normal operating state. The final section of the message was designed to shatter any remaining alien assumptions about human predictability. You have observed us for 17 years and concluded that we are dangerous because we are unpredictable. This assessment is incomplete. We are dangerous because we do not distinguish between rational and irrational responses when faced with threats. Your weapons can delete matter from existence. Our response is to build sandcastles and teach dolphins chess. This is not defiance, this is Tuesday. Dr. Wright had been monitoring alien ship movements, and his reports were becoming increasingly strange. "Sarah, they're not maintaining their previous formations. Some ships have moved significantly farther from Earth, while others have moved closer. They seem to be arguing with each other." The alien ships had begun transmitting to each other with increasing frequency, sending bursts of communication that suggested intensive debate or discussion. For the first time since their arrival, the monolithic authority of the Galactic Council appeared to be fragmenting. Elena's analysis confirmed their worst fears and best hopes. "They're having a crisis of protocol," she announced during an emergency conference call with world leaders. Their entire approach to dealing with problematic species assumes that intelligent beings behave according to rational self-interest. We've just proved that humans fundamentally don't. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. 7-year-old Yuki Tanaka from Osaka, who had spent the day teaching her goldfish to paint watercolors by dipping its tail in paint and encouraging it to swim across paper. Her mother had posted videos of the process online as part of the global irrationality initiated. The videos were included in the cultural bombardment being transmitted to the alien ships. 17 minutes after they were broadcast, every alien vessel in the solar system simultaneously stopped all movement for exactly 43 seconds. Dr. Roberts was the first to understand what had happened. They've never encountered art created by non-intelligent animals under the direction of intelligent beings for purely aesthetic purposes, he explained in a conference call with world leaders. The concept literally doesn't exist in their database of possible behaviors. The goldfish paintings had broken something fundamental in alien analytical systems. They represented creativity without purpose, intelligence directing non-intelligence to create beauty without meaning, and the kind of joyful pointlessness that characterized human nature at its most pure. The alien response to the goldfish paintings revealed the depth of their confusion. Citizens of Sol. 3. Council analysis systems require clarification. Observed behavior patterns suggest intelligent direction of non-intelligent entities for creation of aesthetic objects with no apparent function. This behavior does not correspond to any known category of intelligent species activity. Please classify purpose of fish-created visual products. Humanity's response was swift and devastating. Galactic Council, the goldfish paintings serve no purpose. They exist because a 7-year-old girl thought it would be funny. This is considered normal childhood behavior by human standards. We recommend updating your analysis systems to account for the possibility that intelligent species might do things simply because they can. The message included an addendum that would later be considered the moment when humanity definitively proved their point. Additional clarification: the child in question has now moved on to teaching her hamster to play miniature golf. Yesterday, she attempted to convince her cat to write poetry by walking across a keyboard. Tomorrow, she plans to see if her dog can learn sculpture. This behavior is encouraged by human adults and is considered healthy child development. The silence from the alien fleet lasted for 6 hours. When they finally responded, their message was unlike anything they had transmitted before. Gone was the formal bureaucratic language, replaced by something that sounded almost desperate. Council emergency protocols activated. Species classification, impossible. Threat assessment, undefined. Behavioral prediction models, non-functional. Request immediate guidance from Council Central Authority. For the first time since their arrival, the aliens were asking for help. The mighty Galactic Council, with technology that could reshape matter and travel faster than light, was officially stumped by humans teaching pets to make art. Elena's smile was visible from space. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced to the world leaders still gathered in emergency session, "I believe we've just achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. We've confused an entire advanced civilization into having an existential crisis." The question now was what the Council Central Authority would decide when faced with a species that had proved impossible to understand, predict, or control through conventional means. Humanity was about to find out what happened when you broke an entire galaxy's understanding of how intelligent life was supposed to behave. The response from Council Central Authority arrived 72 hours after the goldfish painting incident, and it changed everything humanity thought they knew about the galaxy. Sarah Chen was in the middle of watching a group of kindergartners attempt to teach pigeons to paint when every screen on Earth flickered to life with a message that was fundamentally different from everything the Galactic Council had transmitted before. The formal, bureaucratic language was gone. The cold authority was absent. Instead, the message began with something no human had expected to see: an apology. Citizens of Sol. 3. Designation: Earth. This communication originates from the Council Central Authority, Emergency Protocol Division. We formally apologize for the actions of Regional Council 7 in their handling of your species assessment. Sarah felt her coffee mug slip from her numb fingers. Around the world, 8 billion humans stopped what they were doing to stare at screens showing an alien government apologizing to them. The message continued, revealing information that recontextualized everything that had happened. Regional Council 7 exceeded their authority in issuing extinction ultimatums without proper consultation with Central Authority. Standard protocol for species deemed impossible to categorize requires immediate escalation to Central Authority for specialized assessment. This protocol was not followed. Dr. Wright rushed to Sarah's side, his instruments tracking massive changes in the alien fleet's positioning. "Sarah, the ships are reorganizing. Some are moving away from Earth entirely, while others, much larger ones, are approaching from outside the solar system." Elena Vasquez joined the emergency conference call from Puerto Rico, her voice tight with excitement and terror. "This changes everything we thought we understood about the situation. We haven't been dealing with the actual Galactic Council, we've been dealing with middle management." The message revealed the scope of humanity's unintentional victory. Species classification, impossible to categorize, has been triggered only 17 times in Council history, spanning 847,000 years. Previous instances required establishment of specialized containment protocols developed by Central Authority specialists. Regional Council 7 lacked authority and expertise to handle such classification. Sarah read the next section with growing amazement. Your species has demonstrated behavioral patterns that fall outside established frameworks for intelligent life. Rather than representing a threat to galactic security, you represent a phenomenon requiring specialized study and accommodation. Central Authority has dispatched appropriate specialists to establish proper diplomatic relations. The revelation that followed would reshape humanity's understanding of their place in the universe. Preliminary analysis indicates that your species exhibits characteristics similar to 3 previously encountered impossible species: the Void Dreamers of Cluster 9, the Temporal Artists of the Magellanic Drift, and the Chaos Dancers of the Galactic Core. These species are considered among the most valuable members of galactic civilization. Dr. Roberts had spent the last 3 days analyzing the alien psychological profiles, and his latest findings supported Elena's theory about bureaucratic incompetence. The Regional Council 7 was following standard procedures for dangerous species, he explained. But they were applying the wrong protocols entirely. We weren't supposed to be assessed as a threat. We were supposed to be assessed as an anomaly. The distinction was crucial. Threatening species were contained or eliminated. Anomalous species were studied, protected, and eventually integrated into galactic civilization as unique contributors to the collective knowledge and culture of the galaxy. The message from Central Authority continued with information that made Sarah's head spin. Void Dreamers contribute to galactic civilization through their ability to conceive of technologies that rational species cannot imagine. Temporal Artists create cultural works that exist across multiple time streams simultaneously. Chaos Dancers have revolutionized our understanding of probability mathematics through their intuitive grasp of random systems. Elena was practically bouncing with excitement. Don't you see what this means? They're not afraid of us because we're dangerous. They're excited about us because we're impossible. We're not a threat to be eliminated. We're a resource to be cultivated. The next section of the message confirmed Elena's assessment. Human irrationality, rather than representing a threat, appears to represent a form of accelerated creative problem-solving. Your species' ability to find unexpected solutions through nonlinear thinking patterns suggests significant potential value to galactic, scientific, and cultural advancement. But it was the final section of the message that truly revolutionized humanity's understanding of their situation. Central Authority formally invites humanity to participate in galactic civilization as a Category 5 impossible species with full protection under anomaly protocols. Your species will be provided with appropriate technology and integration support. Your unique perspective will be valued and protected. The message concluded with something that would have been unthinkable just days before. We look forward to learning from you. The celebrations that erupted across Earth were unlike anything in human history. Not because humanity had avoided extinction, they had done something far more remarkable. They had confused an entire galaxy into recognizing their value. But Elena's analysis revealed an even more extraordinary truth. Look at the timeline, she said during the final emergency session of World Leaders. They said this classification has only been triggered 17 times in 847,000 years. That's roughly once every 50,000 years. We're not just rare. We're incredibly rare. Dr. Wright had been studying the new ships arriving from outside the solar system, and his reports were encouraging. These vessels are different from the Regional Council fleet. They're larger, more complex, and they're broadcasting what appear to be cultural exchange protocols rather than threat assessments. The first direct contact with Central Authority specialists came exactly 1 week after their arrival. The communication was unlike anything the Regional Council had sent, warm, curious, and genuinely excited about meeting humanity. Citizens of Earth, this communication originates from Dr. HFY, Chief Xenocultural Specialist, Central Authority. I have spent the last 847 standard years studying impossible species, and your culture represents the most fascinating example I have encountered. HFY's message was filled with specific observations about human behavior that showed genuine understanding rather than bureaucratic categorization. Your ability to find joy in purposeless activities, to create beauty without function, and to solve problems through deliberate irrationality represents a cognitive approach that rational species cannot replicate. This is not a flaw to be corrected, it is a gift to be celebrated. The integration process that followed was unlike anything science fiction had ever imagined. Rather than being given advanced technology and expected to become like other galactic species, humanity was encouraged to remain exactly as they were. The aliens provided tools that enhanced human creativity rather than replacing it. art supplies that responded to emotion, musical instruments that could capture and replay the feelings of the performer, writing implements that helped authors explore ideas they couldn't consciously articulate. But the most remarkable aspect of First Contact was how little it changed daily human life. Children still built sandcastles, adults still pursued impractical dreams, artists still created works that defied explanation. The only difference was that now, representatives from across the galaxy came to Earth specifically to experience and learn from humanity's beautiful, purposeless chaos. Sarah found herself appointed as Earth's first ambassador to the impossible, a position that apparently existed specifically for liaising with species that couldn't be understood through normal diplomatic channels. Her first official meeting with Dr. Zephay took place in a specially constructed facility that looked like a cross between the United Nations building and a children's playground. The alien, a being that seemed to exist in 7 dimensions simultaneously, was fascinated by humanity's approach to diplomacy. "You negotiate by telling stories," Dr. Zephay observed, his voice carrying harmonics that suggested delight. "You make decisions based on intuition. You solve problems by asking questions that shouldn't work. From a rational perspective, your methods should fail constantly." "But they don't," Sarah replied, watching a group of human children teaching young aliens to play hopscotch in the courtyard below. "Exactly. That's what makes your species so valuable. You achieve success through methods that our best theoretical models say are impossible. By studying your approach to problems, we've already made breakthrough advances in 17 different scientific fields." The conversation was interrupted by laughter from the courtyard, where the alien children had invented a variation of hopscotch that involved teleportation and apparently caused small flowers to grow wherever they landed. "And that," Dr. Zephay said with something that might have been a smile if his species had faces, "is why impossible species are the most important members of galactic civilization. You don't just solve problems we couldn't solve, you help us discover problems we didn't know existed." 6 months after First Contact, Earth had become the galaxy's premier destination for creative problem-solving. Species from across the galaxy sent their most challenging puzzles to human researchers, not because humans were more intelligent, but because they approached problems in ways that rational beings couldn't conceive. Elena Vasquez had been appointed Director of Applied Impossibility, a position that apparently involved teaching alien scientists to embrace productive confusion. Her latest project involved helping a species of hyperlogical beings learn to make art that served no purpose except to be beautiful. "The secret," she explained to her alien students, "is not to try to understand why you're doing it, just do it because it feels right." The concept of feeling right had become a subject of intense study among galactic scientists. Humans' ability to make correct decisions based on intuition rather than analysis had led to technological breakthroughs that were revolutionizing galactic civilization. Dr. Wright had been appointed to lead the Human-Alien Collaborative Research Initiative, where teams of humans and aliens worked together on problems that neither could solve alone. Their first major success had been the development of faster-than-light communication that worked by somehow convincing information that distance was just a suggestion. "We still don't understand how it works," Wright admitted to Sarah during their monthly review meeting. "The aliens designed the technology based on quantum mechanics. Humans suggested that maybe particles could be friends and want to talk to each other instantly, regardless of distance. Somehow, combining those approaches created a working FTL communication system. But perhaps the most remarkable change was in how humanity saw themselves. They had spent their entire history wondering if they were alone in the universe, if they had value, if they belonged among the stars. Now they knew the answer. They weren't just valuable, they were irreplaceable. In a galaxy full of rational, logical, predictable species, humans represented something precious and rare, the ability to be impossible. Sarah stood in her office at the Impossible Embassy watching ships from across the galaxy arrive and depart from Earth's new spaceport. Beings from 1,000 different worlds came to study humanity, to learn from them, to experience the unique perspective that only humans could provide. The irony wasn't lost on her. Humanity had saved themselves not by becoming what the aliens wanted them to be, but by refusing to be anything other than what they had always been. Stubborn, creative, impossible humans who built sandcastles in inappropriate places and taught goldfish to paint. The galaxy was a better place for it.